Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 6, Episode 26, Tears of the Prophets. This episode aired June 17th, 1998. It is the season finale already.
Yes, which means there's going to be a wrap-up episode.
Yeah, we'll do a wrap-up episode next week, so we'll talk about our favorites and least favorites of Season 6, and then we'll take a short break, and then, shockingly, we'll come back for the final season.
And I have to say it, Season 7, it gets really good.
Yes, I have heard that every season. Before we talk about this episode, anything to say about last week's episode, The Sound of Her Voice?
No, it was perfect, but very sad.
Yeah, it was a bit grim at the end. But overall, a good episode.
You did a lot of leadership in the future in that one.
It's one of my favorite topics.
It's what people tune in for.
I was going to say, well, you have the notes, so let's get going. But you don't have the notes. I have the notes.
No, you have the notes.
Yeah.
I could read your notes and stumble through them.
Yeah, let's not do that.
We have very different writing styles.
Yes. In the cold open, Sisko and Major Kira are walking the promenade as another gratitude festival is wrapping up.
Peldor Joy.
Right. Sisko heads off to something happening in the wardroom as Odo approaches. While Kira is taking down some decorations, Odo is attempting to explain he was just trying to maintain order when he arrested a Vedic for fundraising on the promenade without a license.
Yeah.
Kira is very annoyed as he was raising funds for Bajoran flood victims.
You can't bend the rules for religious figures. I mean, what's next? Are they going to give him tax-exempt status?
Oh, geez. Odo tries to have a conversation with her about the nearby orb of contemplation, but she brushes him off.
Oh, yeah. When you've really annoyed your girlfriend, that really doesn't work.
Yeah, changing the subject doesn't help.
Yeah.
Now in the wardroom, Admiral Stuffed Shirt is here to give Sisko the Christopher Pike Medal of Valor Award for recognition of his remarkable leadership and acts of bravery. They should have said, and for getting the Prophets to wipe out all those ships.
That should be it alone.
Jake hugs his dad before Admiral Ross kind of shoos everybody away. And then Ross tells Sisko that Starfleet Command has finally decided to launch an offensive attack into Dominion territory, and they want Sisko to plan the invasion of Cardassia. Big drama as we cue the theme song.
And they're giving it to Sisko because no admiral wanted to take responsibility, because now they can all point at Sisko and say it was his fault.
Oh, totally.
Because that's how Starfleet works.
That's true. After the theme song, Jadzia and Worf come out of a holosuite, and Quark and Bashir ask what they were doing in there for so long. Turns out they were discussing having a baby, which Worf thought was private, but Jadzia is ready to discuss on her podcast, as usual.
That so reminds me of a coworker who used to share that kind of information. Overshare.
TMI.
Oh, yeah. Some people are just TMI by default,
Yeah. I'm from South Dakota. We don't like to tell anybody anything, if we can help it.
Yeah.
Worf gets called to ops, and Julian feels compelled to remind Dax that from a medical point of view, it will be difficult for a Klingon and a Trill to conceive. She doesn't seem to care, and she leaves as Quark says something insulting about hoping their baby doesn't look like Worf. After she's gone, Julian seems stupidly devastated at this turn of events instead of, being a supportive friend.
Well, both of them need to really desperately get over this.
Yeah, they need to look at themselves in the mirror. In Sisko's office now, Sisko is talking about starting the attack on the Dominion in the Chintoka system, which appears to be light on Jem'Hadar defenses at the moment. Martog is happy he's found a weak spot, but he doesn't know how they'll get the Romulans to join in on the attack. He calls them arrogant and untrustworthy.
That Romulan-Klingon love coming out.
Yeah. Admiral Ross points out that they don't have much chance of success without Romulan help. And in typical Klingon fashion, Martog disagrees, saying, "A year from now, the three of us will drink blood wine in the halls of Cardassia Central Command."
You just have to love Martog's confidence.
Yeah.
Just the way that, as a Klingon, he's like, how could victory not be assured?
Yeah, he's very Klingon. Meanwhile, over on smoggy Cardassia, Weyoun thinks Damar is spreading their forces too thin. However, there's still no way to get reinforcements from the Gamma Quadrant. Weyoun points out the vulnerability of the Chinkoda system, but Damar says they've deployed a new defense grid in that system. Unmanned orbital weapons platforms that contain 1,000 plasma torpedoes each. That's a lot. 1,000.
So pretty significant.
Yeah, they don't say how many of the platforms there are, but hundreds, I believe.
But of course, as it's Cardassian, they're not actually working yet.
Yeah. Well, in comes a very smug Dukat, surprising Weyoun and apparently legate Damar. Dukat wonders where his warm welcome is, but no one seems thrilled to see him. He pretty much absolves himself of all of his bad military decisions and then claims he doesn't hold Damar responsible for his daughter's death anymore either. Instead, somehow he feels Sisko forced Damar's hand and he's to blame for what happened to Ziel.
Weyoun was quite impressive here as well. He passed the entire blame for everything onto Dukat.
Yeah, and Dukat was like, oh, no, you were there.
Yeah, I thought that was very Weyoun as well.
But blaming Sisko for Ziel's death is a very interesting retelling of what actually happened.
I think that's a big part of this new version of Dukat. He says he's a new man.
Yeah, but he blames absolutely everything on Sisko from here.
Well, it's all Sisko's fault in his mind.
It's a total obsession.
It's the Weyoun, Kira, and Damar that are in his head. That's what they're telling him.
Right.
I'll bring up a theory about that later.
Okay. Well, Dukat is here to take revenge against Captain Sisko. Weyoun laughs at him, saying he hasn't changed, but Dukat says he's a new man without need for conquest or power. No, he just needs to get Sisko.
Yeah, okay. I personally would not believe that.
Yeah. He says he exists in a state of complete clarity, which he intends to share with the universe. That is terrifying.
Yeah.
Weyoun wants him out, but Damar wants to know why he's come. Dukat says he's here to give them the Alpha Quadrant, and all he needs is a Bajoran artifact, one of the many they appropriated from Bajor during the occupation.
I thought they were supposed to have returned them.
Yeah.
Or was that just the orbs? I don't remember.
I don't know, but they obviously didn't return anything.
The thing here is, I notice he's not thanking Sisko for this complete state of clarity.
Oh yeah, like he did a few episodes ago?
Yeah.
Well, Dukat says with this artifact, he will make it possible for Dominion reinforcements to come through the wormhole and destroy Sisko and the entire Federation. It's funny that he puts Sisko and the entire Federation on the same level. I mean, he has lost his mind.
Well, Weyoun says that to Dukat at one point, that effectively he's lost his mind.
Well, he's not wrong. Back on the station, the Romulans have arrived, and it's not going great. Martog and the Romulans are bickering, of course.
Oh, that senator is completely baiting Martog.
Yes, but Martog is taking the bait at every step.
Oh, yeah. The Romulans just enjoying it at this point.
Yes. Interesting here, only the Romulans have a woman on their side of the table, by the way. Sisko has to eventually shut Martog up, and then he talks about a plan to demolish the Dominion and force them to retreat, rather than letting them continue to rebuild and continue to breed Jem'Hadar. He appears to finally inspire the Romulans.
Yeah, he gives a very motivational speech and very impassioned at the end.
Yes.
And they do seem to go along with it. However, I would question their idea of they'll surround them and then force them to surrender. I don't get the impression the Dominion and the Jem'Hadar
will ever surrender, no.
Will ever surrender.
Well, I do think that the Vorta would. So if you got rid of all the Jem'Hadar and surrounded the Vorta, you might get them to surrender.
Yeah. Well, that's true. Some of them might.
Yeah.
As long as you don't get Iggy Pop, I think the others would happily surrender. Then again, even when it came to the push, he let himself get captured, so...
That's right.
Yeah.
And who was the one in that episode who they accidentally killed? He's the one who would surrender for sure. Now we go to the Holosuite, where we are forced to listen to Vic Fontaine singing a song called Here's to the Losers to Quark and Julian.
You know, that actually is quite an accurate song, and I think that is definitely a summary of those two.
This Holosuite nonsense with this singer, I don't understand it. And I like singing, but I find it really irritating.
Do you feel the same way as I do? Every time he says Pally, I just want to delete the program.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. At least Vic does tell them to move on from Jadzia in this scene, though he tells them that they lost her a long time ago, when in reality they never actually had her. Thankfully, the scene finally ends, and Vic calls them absolutely clueless, which I did appreciate.
And as Vic seems to be this more intuitive, almost like AI-driven holodeck program, I would hope at this point he actually calls Sisko and warns him that Julian is dangerously obsessive.
He hasn't met Sisko.
Not yet.
Now in Sisko's quarters, Jake assumes that he's getting to go along on the invasion of Cardassia because he's a double quote journalist, double quote. This is so silly. I mean, we've never seen an embedded reporter anywhere before.
Well, I think this is a good start.
Ugh. Sisko eventually agrees that he can go on the Defiant with him rather than with Martog and the Klingons.
Yeah.
And then they hug, of course, and Jake says, "Don't worry, Dad, we'll watch out for each other," and he leaves.
I really like that scene because I thought it was almost like Sisko was again trying to protect Jake, but coming to the realization that Jake wants to be this journalist. Jake is going to do this, and he's old enough to make his own decisions, even if Sisko doesn't like them, and even if Grandpa Joe is going to shout at him.
Yeah, that part of it is good, but just the fact that we've never seen a reporter. I mean, maybe it's because in this day and age, reporters in journalism, it just is so different than what it was in the 90s or what people thought it was. There was still sort of a positive view of them and belief that there could be objective ones. And now, I don't know, maybe I just have a different view of it.
Well, the other thing is, we've seen, certainly in the last 20 years, much more of the concept of the embedded reporter.
The embedded reporter has been around for a long time. I don't dispute an embedded reporter in a war zone. What I dispute is an embedded reporter in Star Trek. Never before seen.
So why would you think an embedded reporter in Star Trek would be so odd?
Because we've not seen it before. It just seems strange.
Ah, okay.
That all of a sudden, and Jake acts like it's perfectly normal. I'm a reporter, duh. Well,
yeah.
Has Sisko ever had a reporter on the Defiant before? He has not.
Interesting.
Did we have a reporter anywhere else that you can remember? No.
You had enough trouble with Cassidy on the ship.
Exactly. I just don't like the way we sort of say things like they've been this way forever, but we've never seen it. Well, after Jake leaves, or immediately as Jake leaves, Sisko goes into a vision. The prophets have taken on the form of Worf, Ross, and Martog, and are saying things like, the Sisko is of Bajor, and this is where he belongs, where he is meant to be. Sisko asks if he isn't supposed to go to Cardassia, and they say he is of Bajor, and it's dangerous to walk a different path.
Yes.
The Sisko must not leave the chosen path. But of course, it's just cryptic, and Sisko isn't sure what they're trying to say, as usual.
Well, that's pretty much the tradition with the prophets. You couldn't just come out and say, Ben, we'd really like you to hang around the station. That would just be great. Please don't leave.
Please don't go there.
Yeah.
Now Admiral Ross is giving a briefing on the orbital weapons platforms, saying there are hundreds of them in the Chintoka system, but they're not yet operational. The Romulans have agreed to join the invasion, but they want to know if they can launch the invasion before these new weapons come online. They all agree to leave in the morning, and Martog and the Romulan dude leave. Ross asks Sisko why he seems quiet, and Sisko tells him about the vision, and the prophets basically telling him not to go to Cardassia. Ross wants to know what he intends to do, and Sisko says it isn't about him, it's about the prophets. But Ross says he can't be both the emissary and a Starfleet captain in this situation. He must choose one or the other. Unfortunately, Sisko makes the wrong choice and says he'll be on the Defiant Bridge at 0500.
And once again, we get an example of how absolutely appalling Starfleet admirals are. This is completely the wrong take for this situation. You have these beings who saved your neck, who destroyed all these ships. I think you should listen to what they say very carefully. And you shouldn't put Sisko in the situation of making an either-or decision. You have Dax on the station, who is already a proven commander of the Defiant. On top of that, you also have Sisko is a tactical guy. You want him guiding this operation, not necessarily from the front.
Yeah, if he's supposed
because soon as he got killed, all your plans go out the window.
Yeah, if he's supposed to be in charge of it, he shouldn't be on the front line, in the first ship on the front line.
Yeah, exactly. And like he said, the prophets don't see him as a Starfleet captain. They see him as their emissary. If you've got a creature that appears to be almost as powerful as a Q, you don't ignore them. And this admiral seems to have this petty opinion of, oh, we've indulged you.
Right, yeah.
Terrible leadership. So nothing new there.
Though remember I asked multiple times, what did Sisko tell everyone happened in the wormhole when all of those ships disappeared? Yeah. Did he tell them that it was the prophets? That he asked them for help and they are the ones who did it? Because if Admiral Ross and others don't know what happened, they might not understand the power of the wormhole aliens.
Well, I think they must know.
You got to assume he told them.
Because the Dominion knows.
Right.
The Dominion knows they can't get ships through the wormhole because of the prophets. So there must be some understanding from that side. Maybe Starfleet just doesn't want to admit that these creatures can do that. They're in denial.
It just bothers me that we never talked about what Sisko told everyone, because you could just assume that the wormhole became unstable. I don't know.
Right. They make up their own excuses.
Right.
Not that the prophets went, yeah, we're just going to go and destroy them.
Well, back on Cardassia, Weyoun and Damar know about this new Federation attack, and Damar says the weapons will be live before the attack. In comes Dukat with something he calls the keys to victory. He says over the last few months he's been studying the ancient Bajoran texts, and he's come to realize the wormhole is much more than the gateway to the Gamma Quadrant. It's also the Temple of the Prophets. Duh, where's he been?
Yeah. Well, remember, the Cardassians, for the most part, look at the prophets as some superstitious nonsense, and they actually even kind of mock the Bajorans for their beliefs. So it would sort of make sense that they didn't really consider the prophets as anything real.
Until Sisko made use of them. Again, if everybody knows. Well, he says it's from there, the Temple of the Prophets, that they protect Bajor. And the sad truth is, we wasted our time fighting the Bajorans when we should have been fighting their gods. He opens the box that he brought in and he says, we have an ally we never knew we had, and it's this little wooden doll standing on a platform.
Yeah.
He tells Weyoun and Damar to step back, and then he performs a little ritual, and he snaps the doll in half. A red light flies from inside the doll and hits Dukat, sending him flying backwards. This, unfortunately, looks a lot like the lights we saw in the episode The Reckoning.
Yeah, exactly.
When Damar rushes to Dukat, we see he has the red demon eyes that Jake had in that episode when he was possessed by a paw wraith.
And his voice is all echoey.
Oh, scary.
And then this weird echoey voice, he says, your concern is touching but unnecessary.
Yep.
He's been possessed by a paw wraith. Why didn't Keiko's eyes go red then?
But they hadn't thought of that yet.
Ah, okay. Oh, it was an undercover paw wraith.
Back to the station, and Kira comes to see Odo to tell him she's leaving with the task force in the morning. Odo launches into an apology about arresting the Vedic, and Kira inexplicably has forgotten all about that. I think she was too mad to forget it quite that quickly.
If your partner's that mad and you can't get away with a redirection, they're going to remember about it.
Yeah, at least for a day. But she says now she knows why Odo has been avoiding her for the last few days. And he says, I haven't been avoiding you. I've been helping you avoid me. At this point, he figures he made her so mad that their relationship is over. And she sort of laughs. She says, people argue all the time without breaking up. She was hoping they would spend the evening together before she leaves, and he's happy but definitely confused. Relationships are hard.
In summary, yes.
Yes. Now it's 5 a.m. and the fleet is getting ready to leave.
If this was so important, why did they wait until the next morning?
Why didn't they just go?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not like they need first light or something. It's inexplicable why they didn't just go. And now, in a move that makes even less sense, Dax is staying behind to mind the station. Kira tells her she said a prayer for Jadzia about them having a baby, which seems like a very Kira thing to do.
That does.
Worf kisses Jadzia goodbye, and everyone heads into the Defiant. On the Defiant, we find Nog and Garak on this mission.
Yay, it was great to see Garak again.
Garak seems quite keen to be on a mission to liberate his homeworld.
Yeah.
Everyone's getting ready for the attack.
And we see an awesome, huge space fleet leaving the station. That I really liked.
Yeah. We go back to Cardassia as the Federation fleet approaches the Chintoka system. Weyoun is annoyed to hear the weapons are still offline.
Of course.
Weyoun says, it pains me to say this, but you Cardassians are proving to be quite a disappointment. Damar says, I'll remind you said that.
It took him this long to figure it out.
Yeah, they should have been disappointed quite a while ago.
Yeah.
On the Defiant now, the fleet is approaching the Chintoka system. Jake is loitering around the bridge, and Sisko tells him to sit down. The battle begins as the Klingons and Jem'Hadar start shooting at each other, and the Klingons are taking a lot of hits.
Yeah, the Jem'Hadar are going straight for kamikaze tactics. They're not fighting the ships, they're just ramming into them.
Yeah, awful. The rest of the fleet starts destroying the dark weapons platforms, but before they get many of them, the platforms come online and start destroying the Federation ships with relative ease.
Yes.
I mean, they have 1,000 plasma torpedoes.
It's a great space battle. It's terrible to see the fleet getting just so beaten up so quickly.
I hate that, yeah.
But it is great effects. This is another really good space battle scene. They really pull out the stops with these things. I mean, this must have been insanely expensive back in the day.
Yeah.
It's probably why they don't have so many intricate costumes and aliens in the series, because they're spending all the money on the visual effects.
Oh, maybe. Although I would think costumes would be a small price to pay by comparison.
Not if you're doing good ones. I mean, if you're just sticking some tinfoil on some black gators, then...
From season 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're usually only doing a few costumes. You're not doing hundreds or thousands.
Yeah.
Unless you're Discovery in the Mirrorverse. Back on Cardassia, Damar tells Weyoun he owes him an apology, and Weyoun smiles and agrees. Damar says now we just need Dukat to get our reinforcements through the wormhole, but Weyoun doesn't have much faith in Dukat's plan. All this talk of gods strikes me as nothing more than superstitious nonsense. Damar finds this funny since Weyoun believes that the founders are gods, and Weyoun quickly says, that's different. The founders are gods.
And from his perspective, they really are.
Yeah. And Damar very wisely doesn't argue with him. He's just like, okay.
We already see that he holds them in absolute reverence.
Yeah. Well, the battle is going badly when Garak realizes none of the weapons platforms have their own power generators on board, so they start looking around for the power source. Back on the station, Julian gives Jadzia good news that the enzymes he's giving her seem to be working, so it looks like she'll be able to conceive a baby with Worf, after all.
Oh, more baby talk.
I mean, this is a day later, right? This is very strange that it would work this quickly. Jadzia is thrilled, which bodes very badly for her future. She thanks him, then says she's going to stop by the Bajoran shrine since Kira said a prayer for her last night. And Julian sort of ominously waves goodbye to her as she walks off. It was creepy. In the shrine, an orb seems to be completely unguarded again. And Dax doesn't know what she's supposed to do while she's there, but she says, if you are prophets, I just want to say... But before she can say much, the nearby candles blow out, and Dukat beams into the temple.
Yes.
Jadzia reaches for her phaser, but it's too late. Dukat, or the Pa Wraith inside of him, shoots a red beam from his hand and violently attacks Jadzia, lifting her off the ground and then dropping her to the floor.
Did not look good.
No. Dukat walks over to the orb and appears to reach harmlessly through a force field and open the container of the orb.
So they did have a force field at least.
Yeah, except it didn't even hurt Dukat's body. It did nothing.
Well, he's channeling the power of a Pa Wraith.
He still has a body, though.
Well, I think they could probably protect the body. Because remember, Kira and Jake, when they were fighting, they were channeling a huge amount of energy.
Yeah, but they were injured.
Yes, but they were only injured because they were actually fighting. They seemed to be able to channel the energy without it hurting them.
No? Okay.
Headcanon?
Yeah, headcanon for sure. When the orb is revealed, the Pa Wraith seems to get sucked out of Dukat into the orb. The orb goes black and stops spinning. Dukat now has his normal eyes back, and he looks up, smiling.
Hey.
Outside, we see the wormhole open and then seem to sort of implode quietly and go dark. At the exact same time, Sisko grabs his head and stumbles on the Defiant. Jake asks what happened, but Sisko isn't sure. He thinks the prophets were reaching out to him.
1,000,000 prophets cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced.
That would have been a good line.
Yeah. Stolen from Obi-Wan.
Well, this alarms Major Kira. Miles announces he's found the energy source on a nearby moon. Major Kira sees that Sisko isn't himself and immediately takes over, sending Sisko to his quarters.
Isn't that great? I loved the way she just steps up immediately and just takes command. There's no messing around. Kira is the person you want on your side. And I'll raise the question, why wasn't she in charge of the Defiant then?
Definitely. Yeah, I don't know. We've never been able to figure out why sometimes she's there and sometimes she's not. It doesn't make a ton of sense. Back on the station, Dukat leans over Jadzia's lifeless body and says, I never intended you any harm. But then he just beams away.
He didn't give her any help either.
He didn't. I mean, I'm glad it wasn't Dukat exactly who did this, but still, it's his fault. The Federation ships are still getting the crap beaten out of them.
Oh, yeah. They're taking a pounding.
The Defiant and a few other ships try shooting at the power generator on the moon, but they can't break through the defenses. Miles suggests using the deflector array to imprint a Federation warp signature on the generator's energy matrix, making the orbital platforms fire on their own power source, which sounds hilarious, like they didn't even put a failsafe into that. I think Weyoun is still right about the disappointing Cardassians.
It is the Cardassians.
Well, the plan works seamlessly, and the weapons are quickly disabled, allowing the Federation ships through.
This was another great space battle scene of the asteroid just totally explodes when the satellites start firing. This is a very effects-intense episode.
Oh, yeah.
And did you notice at 3555, a nice big galaxy class blowing up one of the satellites and then flying past?
Yeah. Well, just then, Julian calls with a priority 1 message from the station, and Kira looks concerned. Back on Cardassia, Weyoun is not pleased. Not only have Federation soldiers landed on Cardassian soil, Dukat has called to say the wormhole is gone. Dukat says, yeah, things didn't turn out quite the way I'd planned, but a great victory has been achieved.
Oh.
Because the Bajoran people have been cut off from their gods forever, and so has Sisko. Without the prophets, he's just another Starfleet captain.
And I like how Weyoun says, and that's supposed to make me feel better?
Yeah.
I think they missed the fact that Dukat was maybe not on the same page with their ambitions.
No, he wasn't. The Defiant docks at the station and Worf rushes to sickbay. The Bajorans circle the emissary asking if the prophets have abandoned them.
Oh.
Sisko says he will try and find them, but he doesn't really have any answers, of course.
Oh, yeah, and that was very touching the way the little girl said, you have to find them, emissary.
You have to find them. Now we all go to sickbay, where Julian comes out in surgical gear to say he saved the Dax symbiont, but there was nothing he could do for Jadzia. And everyone looks shocked. With the way that she got shot, I don't know how the symbiont would have survived.
Yeah.
And not Jadzia. I mean, it was like right in the gut, basically.
That's true, and they are somewhat fragile. So,
And they're not that small.
Yeah. They're resistant to Par-Wraith energy.
Maybe.
Hand wave.
Well, because in their little pools, they do exchange little electrical impulses and stuff.
Yeah.
So maybe energy doesn't get them.
Oh, so this is something that they were naturally somewhat resistant to.
Yeah.
That's good headcanon, Cam.
Oh, thank you. Maybe this actually ends up making Dax more powerful or dangerous.
Oh.
The symbiont, I mean.
Maybe absorbed that energy and got some of the Par-Wraith's abilities.
Maybe. Well, now Worf is at Jadzia's side when she says she's sorry. With Sisko looking on, she dies, and Worf just roars into the sky. It's just heartbreaking. Well, later, Sisko is alone with Jadzia's coffin. He says she was his friend, and he's going to miss her. He says he should have listened to the prophets and not gone to Cardassia. Then maybe she'd still be alive.
And Jadzia's ghost says, duh.
He says he needs her to help him. Something has happened to the prophets, causing them to turn their backs on Bajor, and he's responsible. He doesn't know what to do about it. He failed as the emissary, and for the first time in his life, he failed in his duty as a Starfleet officer. He needs time to clear his head. He needs to get away and find a way to make things right again.
That was a great delivery by Avery. You could really feel for Sisko here. Just everything has gone wrong.
Yeah.
He made a bad decision, and it's cost the life of his friend, and something's happened to the prophets. And worst of all, they even told him and warned him.
Yeah. I'm afraid he is responsible.
Yeah.
Now we see Sisko walking out of his office carrying a bag, and he tells Kira the station is all hers. He tells Julian he doesn't know how long he'll be gone, and Odo says they'll be waiting for him, which is just very cute. He shakes Miles' hand, and he thanks everyone before leaving with Jake.
Notice the chief was the only one that Sisko shook his hand.
Yes. Kira heads into the office with Odo right behind her. She sits down at Sisko's desk, and she says she was afraid of this. Sisko isn't sure he's coming back. Odo asks how she knows that, and it's because she sees that he took his baseball.
Yes.
Iconic moment.
Oh, completely.
Yeah. Now we go to just outside of Grandpa Joe's restaurant on Earth, and Sisko is dressed all in white, like a line cook or a bus person.
Yep.
And he's sitting in the alley on his own, scrubbing what looks like, I think, clams?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm not really sure.
Or oysters, something like that.
Well, the end. Ugh. Well, before we go into overanalysis, I want to say that we've reached the episode, finally, of the last real spoiler that I knew about.
Yeah.
I knew about this before we started doing the podcast. I remember when Jadzia died when the show was airing. It's
right.
Not that I was watching it. You were watching it, and you told me about it. I also knew that she was replaced by a different Dax later. It was my last real spoiler until Worf spoiled something recently for me on Picard. There are a couple of other little things I've learned that are yet to come, just things that I've learned since we started watching the show, things I wouldn't have remembered necessarily if I'd heard it before, because I didn't know all the characters. But nothing really as major as this one. And I have to say, it's both a relief and a bummer to get through this episode. Like, I didn't know when it was going to happen. I knew it was coming, but it was just quite a bummer at this point. And I think having watched television with me for years, when they kill off a female character I like, I generally go, I'm done, and I don't watch it anymore.
Yes, you do not like that.
Has happened, will continue to happen.
That's true. It has happened in the past.
Farscape comes to mind.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so now let's go to over-analysis. What do you have?
Well, I think the first point is, in Children of Time, Worf and Jadzia didn't seem to have any trouble having children.
Oh my god, I forgot all about that. Maybe he had those enzymes on the ship.
I could assume Bashir was there, but...
Oh my god, I forgot all about that. What a good point. Yeah, we lost our own canon.
Right. Just seemed kind of odd.
Well, though, when we watched that show, we talked quite a bit about how none of the Klingons had spots, trill spots. So maybe they didn't have any biological kids.
Oh, they did. Some were Klingon by birth, some were...
No, Worf could have had a biological kid with someone else. Like they could have had a surrogate or something.
Interesting.
I mean, they never talked about that, but headcanoning my way out of it.
Okay, that's actually kind of a good one.
You could argue that.
Yeah, I don't know how Jadzia would feel about that, but...
I don't think she'd be thrilled. But it's possible that they did that on purpose because she was unable to conceive.
Yeah. Oh, in which case, that's a very tricky way of getting around it, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I headcanoned my way out of it.
You're on a headcanon roll this episode.
Every now and then, I get a few.
Next thing. So, they just allowed Dukat to come back?
Yeah, come on.
I have a theory here, which is maybe Weyoun was hoping to just humiliate Dukat. He was being petty in his own way and was figuring Dukat would just make a fool of himself and he could parade him as a failure. And it sort of got out of hand. But at the same time, Dukat's already failed spectacularly once before.
Yeah.
Why would you trust him with anything? Then again, I suppose if you were trying to find some way of humiliating him, you might humor him for a bit. And then he did find that Bajoran artifact. So,
Well, I wonder if Weyoun just viewed him as obsolete.
Yeah.
He didn't really think it made any difference what Dukat did and just didn't really care.
Yeah.
But once he destroyed the wormhole, he probably regretted that decision.
Right. At this point as well, with the founders, maybe they should also think about replacing Weyoun.
Well, they can't now. At least not with someone on the other side of the wormhole. But yes, they should replace him with one of the Iggy Pop versions.
So yeah, I think the lesson here is don't give Dukat a second chance.
Yeah, that's a good lesson. I'd have gotten rid of Dukat a long time ago.
Next point. Dukat said he was a new man and how he had perfect clarity. I have the theory that the Kira, Damar, and the Weyoun that he keeps on seeing, they're not in his mind. They are Par-wraiths. They are visions. They are the anti-prophets. And they are the thing that is now guiding him.
Boy, they could be.
Yeah.
But they speak in complete sentences.
Well, they're evil.
Interesting. It's possible. They're certainly giving him advice that has led to the supposed end of the Temple of the Prophets, which is what the Par-wraiths wanted.
And this concept about clarity. Remember Sisko going back to Rapture?
Oh, yeah. That's some headcanon.
Kind of leading on from that point, I think they should be very concerned about what other Bajoran artifacts contain Par-wraiths or such like. How much other stuff is out there?
Good question.
And it seemed relatively easy to actually extract the Par-wraith from that thing. What else is in the writings? There's almost an instruction manual for it.
It's very easy and convenient when the story needs it.
Oh, okay.
It's like using the Orb of Time.
Ah, yes. Well, Kira seems to be someone who can use that at will.
Yep, she's used it twice.
Next thing. The power for these remotely controlled platforms. Do you think this was an example of the Cardassians cheaping things out? Instead of putting power on each one of them and have them fully independent, they kind of cheaped it out and they used this central distribution. I saw this as kind of an example of the Cardassians, the way they sort of half do things. The paint over rust. Remember, I brought this up in the past about how they're almost close to being an empire, but most of it is front.
Right.
So instead of doing it properly, they do something rushed, kind of shoddy, and it results in this situation.
Right. I mean, they didn't even have a backup. It was a single power source on one moon that shut the entire thing down. Like, I could see maybe you had a cluster of them controlled by one power source and another cluster controlled by another power source. It shows their ineptness, and maybe it is that they cheap everything out, or maybe what happened was the guy in charge of it did it cheap so he could have some extra latinum for himself, something stupid like that. Yeah, and nobody checked on it.
So the corruption is affecting it.
Yeah, it was bad.
Because that felt like it also tied back to Weyoun's comment of saying they were disappointed with the Cardassians. Surely you could have looked at how sort of inept the Cardassians were in the past and how they'd failed in their strategic visions, etc. in the past.
Right.
And gone, why are we allying with these guys?
And why wouldn't you make absolute sure it was impossible for these platforms to destroy their only power source?
Yeah.
Because what if a ship flew in front of it and then it shot at it and it missed and hit? I mean, it makes no sense.
Aiming at this area in space is off limits.
Yes.
Don't shoot your own power supply.
Yeah, it's bad.
And I think my final point is, when you receive messages from godlike races telling you to do something specific, or this is probably the most direct the prophets have actually been.
Yeah, hinting strongly.
Yes, it wasn't like a riddle that you had to figure out. It was fairly straightforward.
Right.
You really should do what they said. Regardless of what some admiral from their perfect ivory tower says.
Yeah.
This is a race beyond time. Listen to them. I guess it's the culmination of Sisko dividing his two roles of emissary and Starfleet captain. And he went on the side of Starfleet captain because he didn't get the support from the people above him, the admiral. And he erred, I think, on caution, which was doing what he knew rather than making the leap of faith.
That's interesting. My very first point in overanalysis is, why did Sisko defy the prophets?
Yeah.
There have been a couple of episodes like Rapture and The Reckoning where he wasn't willing to. He didn't, and it turned out that he was right. He made the right decision to do what the prophets were telling him, or at least what he felt like the prophets were telling him. So why in this situation did he not? I mean, maybe it was because he didn't want to disappoint Ross, who has been supportive of him, and he does believe in Ross, I think. But to me, I'm not sure I buy that. There's some other reason why he defied them, and I don't know what it is. It's almost like he was too cocky or something.
Really?
I don't know.
I saw it more as he had to finally make a decision where he stood, and at that moment, he didn't have the faith in the prophets.
But he had to make that decision before with his own son's life.
Yes, that's true. But I saw this as the weakness of the human. This was the moment he faltered.
Yeah. Well, that's why I was saying, was he being cocky? Because here he was now put in charge of this.
Oh,
and he
sort of ambition.
Hey, but I'm the boss now. Yeah, did he get clouded by ambition? I mean, lesser people certainly have been clouded by it.
Yeah, I think I'm agreeing with your concept there.
Yeah.
This is the moment where Sisko, the human, failed.
I gotcha.
He didn't have the faith that he'd shown in the past.
Yeah.
I thought it worked really well for the story.
Yeah.
Especially at the end where you see Avery just so beautifully plays Sisko having to deal with the fallout of his actions.
Yeah. And taking responsibility for everything.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how ultimately at the end of the day, he's the mirror of Dukat. Doesn't take responsibility for any
Blames
of it.
Somebody else for everything.
None of it was his fault. Whereas here, Sisko is like, I can't avoid taking the blame.
Right.
It's an interesting contrast between the two, which is almost the entire point. What else you got?
If the prophets are outside of time, then how can anything cause anything else?
That is the only flaw with creatures that live outside of time and are almost godlike in their abilities.
It's really quite impossible to write creatures like that because, first of all, it's impossible for the rest of us to understand in a way that we could recreate it.
Yeah.
But even thinking, did Kai Wynn change the future by her actions in The Reckoning? Well, the answer is she shouldn't be able to.
Yes.
Because the prophets should be able to have already seen that. I don't know. I think we've talked about it before where maybe they're able to see all sorts of different outcomes and they exist amongst all of the different outcomes.
So to them, it doesn't really make that much difference which outcome that happens. So they're watching it.
But if that were true, they wouldn't punish Sisko.
Yeah.
Because it wouldn't make sense. And they've already told Sisko, like, he can't rest on Bajor. So they've already made him pay some penance or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's kind of similar here, I feel like.
Interesting.
So, yeah, that's a little murky. Well, from here, I don't know what happens. I don't know if the wormhole is gone forever. I don't know if it comes back.
You get season 7. That's what happens from here.
Yeah, I know I have another season, but I don't know a lot about season 7 except for the new Dax is about all that I know. So everything's still to come. Okay, so let's go to women in the future. I have a lot to say in Women in the Future.
I am not surprised.
Maybe the worst part of this story is how Terry Farrell, who portrayed Jadzia Dax, was treated during the making of this show. Somehow, you're treated badly in this industry, the entertainment industry, if you aren't deemed to look a particular way, and you're treated badly in a different way if you do look a particular way. I mean, it's sad and pathetic, and it really bothers me that it tarnishes Star Trek's history as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not the only one. I want Star Trek to be as perfect as what we think Starfleet is and what the future really is, but it isn't. It's mired in gender politics and politics of the world going back to the 60s. But the same is true of the show in the late 80s and the 90s. And the same is true now. We have richer characters across genders now, but it's still heavily criticized by just trolls. And that's what they are. They're trolls. That's upsetting to me to think about what Terry Farrell went through. It's upsetting. And it really tarnishes Star Trek. Well, with regard to the actual story, though, in this episode, I very much liked how Major Kira just stepped into the leadership role when Sisko was hampered. And I like how she relied on the crew when there were Starfleet things that she didn't know. She made quick decisions based on trust in the people that she had been working with for some time, but also in her own experience. And I thought that was great. What a great example of women in the workplace in the future. The other thing here that I didn't like is the baby part of the episode. It was so ham-fisted. It was added just to try to give Jadzia's death more weight and to make it sadder. And that's just pathetic and insulting. I really didn't appreciate that. And then in the end, we find Dax in the temple, a place that her character really didn't even belong. And I don't buy that she would all of a sudden go there based on all the other things that have happened and all of the times that Kira has referenced the prophets, and it's had no meaning to her. But now in this case, she did. I don't buy it, and I thought it was terrible. I thought it was not the right step for this character at all. It's disappointing that her character ended in a place that just didn't make any sense for her.
Personally, I would have preferred 2 possible ways of Jadzia's character dying. She destroys the power station by crashing a ship into it. That would be pretty impressive.
Something noble. Although you would have lost Dax then.
Yeah, that's true. Or the second one would be having her actually defending the orb from Dukat and the Power Wraith.
That would have been great.
Make it more of a battle.
Yes, that would have been much better. That's the end of my Women in the Future section, so I will go to rating. So thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
Absolute thumbs up. Love this episode. There are some annoying parts of it, and it was very disappointing to lose Dax. I don't recall if I knew she was leaving the show.
Yeah, I don't remember if it was widely known or not.
Because you always kept me informed of everything that was happening in every show. So,
because it was in some entertainment magazine I was reading.
Yeah, exactly. I remember this being probably, I think it really was the first of the season finales where I was just like, what the heck is happening here? Where are we going with this? Yeah. And I remember just feeling very much just pushed out on the ledge here of like, I really want to know what happens next. What do you mean I've got to wait months for the next season? It was a great cliffhanger. It was really well done. I thoroughly enjoyed this episode. Despite its flaws, and despite losing a great character, it was an impressive end of a season.
Well, I'm glad you liked it, but I'm going to give it a thumbs down.
Really?
I'm really disappointed in the senseless ending to Dax.
Yes.
It wasn't honorable or noble. She didn't even get to fight back. If Michael Dorn had chosen to leave the show and they wanted to kill him off, do you think that's how they would have killed him? I really doubt it.
No.
This character who was previously portrayed as a warrior, just senselessly killed in a place she didn't even belong. It was just disappointing. I liked what happened to Sisko in this episode and appreciated that entire part of the story, including the ending, but I don't respect the rest of it, and for that reason, I can't give it a thumbs up. I think this is the first time I've ever given a thumbs down to an end of season episode.
Wow.
Because they're usually so good.
Yeah.
I get the cliffhanger aspect of it. I see what you're saying. It is actually an amazing cliffhanger.
Right.
But I thought the rest of it was terrible.
It's hard to disagree that in 50% of this episode, they dropped the ball.
It's just even where she was when she died. It didn't make sense.
Yeah.
I read a bunch of things about, the writers, they really struggled with how they were going to kill her off. Well, then don't kill her off. Oh my God. Come up with something better. Look how Spock died. In Star Trek II, spoiler, Spock dies. And it was so dramatic.
Yeah.
You cry because it's terrible and he does it selflessly. This character was in more episodes than Spock.
Yeah.
It just felt insulting. Like they just went, yeah, you want to leave the show? Here you go. She's been in like 150 episodes at this point. What other Star Trek character has been treated this way? Zero.
Tash is the closest.
Yeah, who didn't like the fact that she was a secondary character.
Well, she made the joke about how she could be replaced in most scenes by a pair of legs.
Well, she wasn't wrong. I mean, the writing for women in TNG was not stellar. All right, well, that wraps up Season 6, Episode 26, and all of Season 6.
And a very different opinion on endings.
Yes. Well, come back next week for the Season 6 wrap-up, and then come back a few weeks after that for the start of Season 7.
Yes, we get into the final stretch.
Before moving on to Voyager.
I think we're kind of committed to Voyager now, aren't we?
I feel like we are. Prodigy really got us committed to it.
Yeah.
Well, in the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own over-analysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at rebingeit@gmail.com or tweet us at rebingeit. We're also on YouTube and Instagram at rebingeit. You can check us out on talkthroughmedia.com, where you can leave feedback for individual episodes, or you can listen to the other Star Trek podcasts in our network.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.